professional who is passionate about delivery and focuses on successful management of people, stakeholders, and budgets. He had worked primarily on financial services sector, especially in banks and management consulting firms. Has a lot of
the regulator, so I will therefore do compliance only. The other thing though that we do see is once they do focus then on the next step in regards to monetization, commercialization, building out their ecosystem, they generally have quite a large range of partners to choose from. Because a large bank, certainly for a fintech for example, is a very attractive partner given the breadth of customers that that bank would have. So we've seen them move pretty quickly then into expanding their ecosystem. So I think that from our experience has been how the large banks have tended to react to the open banking regulations. The smaller banks then are traditionally more agile. They generally can get things done quicker. They've generally got quicker and more agile product development shops. So we've certainly seen a lot of smaller and medium-sized banks really looking at challenging around specific niche products and saying, okay, well, how can I take advantage of that? Can I partner with an aggressive or a smart fintech who's got a good product, and can I bring that to market quickly? I think the experience we've seen within Europe is that that's happened quite regularly. And Starling Bank is a great example. If you guys have a look at Starling Bank and the range of partnerships that they've formed even in the last couple of months, they're very aggressive in partnering with real estate firms, with accounting software providers and the like, really looking at providing a good holistic range of services for their customers. So they're a great example of someone who's just said, right, I'm going to take advantage of this very quickly and I'm going to bring a new product to market with the goal being to disintermediate the banks and certainly take market share. And I think the small banks can form alliances very quickly and they've got that level of agility. From a fintech point of view, I think it's for us, it's all about how can they themselves, certainly as a new product development shop for the banks. Certainly they have the ability to get the information. They know exactly how to via the API. So the question is, how can they certainly market themselves and form alliances with the banks and do it quickly? And I think we're seeing very progressive fintechs within the UK, within Europe, taking advantage of that, building those interfaces and certainly developing new products on behalf of the banks, and then either exporting or importing those services. So I think we're seeing a very active fintech community within Europe in particular, and certainly some good, strong new products coming to market. The industry bodies, I think it's critical that there's alignment. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but certainly in the UK, in Europe in particular with PSD2, there was the challenge around the fact that the regulatory technical standards were out of whack with the legal framework. So that created quite a lot of delays for the project. Banks had to be legally compliant with PSD2, but then had another 18 months to develop the technical solution. So it wasn't a solution that certainly led itself to early adopters. So I think the advice certainly to the regulators here would be just make sure that you fully understand. If you're going to put a timeline on it, make sure that the regulatory technical standards and the API standards, for example, are there so people know exactly what they need to build. Because otherwise, if you don't know what you need to build, then you certainly can't be compliant within the time frame. And I think customers, this has been an interesting dynamic, and I think starting to see an adoption. There's been various studies that have come out of the UK talking about the fact that customers are very ambivalent towards open banking. If you go and survey the man on the street, no one really knows what it is, no one's heard about it. So I think there's those angles. I think on the flip side, you've also seen good adoption of some strong products. If you look at HSBC's Connected Money app as an example, very take-up, very strong product take-up, extremely strong number of downloads, I think, in the first couple of weeks. So I think there's really a range of customers that are actively embracing the new solutions that are there. But I think our hypothesis very much is, if we're talking about aggregation services, there's another slide further on where we talk about aggregation and what that brings for a customer. What we're really seeing is, I think, that the main beneficiary of that in Europe so far has been the multi-banked small business and corporate customers. And it's really, for us, the sweet spot is very much a company that isn't big enough yet to have a treasury department. So therefore, they're not totally on top of their liquidity management, their cash flow management, they're multi-banked. So that would tend to be in a variety of different places. So we're really seeing that sweet spot at the moment for those aggregation services, for banks coming in and saying, I can make your your cash flow management, liquidity management, collateral management much easier as a small business. And I think they're the products that have launched and landed very well in an open banking environment so far. So I think we'll continue to watch that space. And we're also seeing a range of exciting new products and partnerships that are coming to market. What does success look like? And then how do we know that it's been successful? And I think that's the million-dollar question. And I think we'll come back in a year's time and we'll ask that question and see, will the government say that open banking in Mexico has been successful? What is the measure of that? Is it API usage? Is it API stats? How do you define what success is in this space? So I think it's going to be very interesting to challenge the government and challenge the regulator as to clearly specifics of switching. And then in Europe for PSD2, it's very unclear as to what success looks like. So I think the challenge for anyone bringing in open banking regulations is around what does success look like and how do we define that. So we can have some questions on that at the end, but I don't know the answer to that. It's going to be very interesting to see how you judge that, and do you judge that by the new range of partnerships and products that are okay, or is it API usage? So I think we'll wait and see on that one. And again, Europe is in its infancy, in the development phase of this. I think it's a question of how do we make sure that we can learn from those economies and see what success looks like there. I'm just going to very quickly talk through the next few slides. How are we going for time? Just one more time. Oh, yeah, very okay. I think banks, and certainly large banks and small banks, are very much looking at, well, what do I need to do? And we've already spoken a little bit about this, but we are seeing customers make strategic, and customers as in clients of Accenture, making strategic choices in regards to, do I want to just do the bare compliance? And if I've only got time to do that, then I will. And moving across the value chain to looking at, okay, how do I make some money out of this? This is a commercial model. I'm a commercial institution. How do I make sure that I can either look at providing greater access to my products and services, but also with an element of monetization? How do I then move that to the next level, which is around advisory services and really growing my product base and my product advisors to again gain a greater share of revenue from the customer base? To the holistic view of how do I get involved in all the bank and non-bank transactions? So all the financial and non-financial transactions that my customer does. How do I get in the middle of that? So how do I partner with a real estate company? So if someone's on a real estate app, and all of a sudden I know that they're on a real estate app because I'm partnered with them, and I'm a bank, and I can send them through a pre-approved offer for a mortgage as they're looking at their property. We've seen examples of the Commonwealth Bank in Australia doing exactly that, where a customer will actually send a photo of the property while they're standing out in front of the house to the Commonwealth Bank, and they will send them through a mortgage offer on the spot. So they can see potentially what they've been pre-approved for and what's the affordability, how much money would a mortgage cost to buy exactly that house. So I think that's a great example of collaboration. It's a great example of finding a solution to a customer problem. Because the fundamental thing anyone wants to know when they're standing there looking at a house is, well, what's the mortgage going to be on that? And can I afford it? And potentially, would I actually be pre-approved for that? But with the extra data that a bank has on the back of open banking, they can look at that and certainly make proactive, pre-approved offers to customers for scenarios where they need them. And Cynthia and I were talking about that yesterday. The best banking services are the ones where the loan or the product is at your fingertips when you need it. And when you're going to buy a TV, and if you don't have the money on your credit card, or you don't want to put on your credit card, and all of a sudden you've got a pre-approved loan amount sitting on your app ready to go, which you can draw down at favourable rates, because the bank understands your spending patterns. The bank understands how you interact and how you spend your money and how you save, and they can certainly provide those increased loan opportunities for a customer to draw down at their convenience. And I think that's what we're going to see with open banking. I think we're going to see a prevalence of new products around lending products, around point of sale lending, and around certainly pre-approved offers for customers, because the bank understands the entirety of the customer's financial transactions. Also, this is obviously then how they then partner with their fintech community. But it's very much, the banks as an access facilitator. And this is a bank forming partnerships. This is a bank working with the fintechs, it's working with the developer community, it's looking at how do I bring new products, how do I potentially outsource my product development, because I can go to a fintech who's got a strong product and I can basically leverage their product development function and bring it in-house and then sell it via my channels. And then, how do I partner with large merchants? How do I partner with, people like the airlines? We saw a great example out of Germany the other day where Deutsche Bank and the IATA, the International Association of Travel Agents, coming together to look at, well, how do we cut the card out of the transaction? So if I'm going to buy a flight, I would tend to obviously put it on my credit card because that's usually what you need to do because you probably haven't got that money sitting in your current account. But the question was, how do we make it easier for a customer? So Deutsche and the IATA have now teamed up with the specific goal being to really reduce the card interchange fees and merchant service charges and make it easier for the customer to basically just fund that transaction from their current account. And that's their stated goal. So they're working on that now actively, and I think we'll see more and more alliances like that, where we're seeing large corporates, banks, fintechs partnering and collaborating to form certainly a greater range of products and services for their customer base. The revenue model, I think, is challenging, but the nirvana really is data monetization. It's now with this richer range of data, how can I use that, how can I monetize, and how can I see if I can get some revenue out of that? And then via the third-party distribution model, it's really around referral fees and certainly credits for products and services that the partnerships have sold. So I think that's a model that's evolving. I think we're certainly seeing, the initial phases within Europe, for example, I think this is a model that is evolving. Banks have traditionally gone for the next model that I'll talk about first, and then they're rapidly following into the access facilitation model. But I think if we're seeing certainly anything take off in the short term within Europe, and I think we'll see this definitely within Mexico, there's no question. I think it's a question of how do you handle that aggregation piece, and it's the small business example that I gave before. A small business would tend to be multi-banked. They may also have relationships with they'll have PayPal accounts and they'll have a range of other services. And the question is, if I can successfully bring that together and really look and analyze that customer's information, then it's a question of, well, what services can I offer in terms of either personal financial management or business financial management for that corporate or that customer, and what value can I add, and how can I understand their spending patterns and use strong analytics to make sure that I fully understand the customer's spending. So I think that's a very interesting space. It's direct to the customer. The benefits are obviously there's cross-selling benefits, but particularly the main benefit really around the data analysis and monetization of that data. And then more and then the specifics around the improved credit scoring. I have a much more holistic view now of that customer, so therefore I can credit score them better. And therefore if I can credit score them better, then I can offer pre-approved loans, I can offer more targeted lending to that customer base. So I think this is where we've seen the banks and the fintechs within Europe go in the initial phases of open banking and CMA. And I would suspect that this is the early part of in Mexico when open banking is introduced. I would suspect that this will be the first range of products that will actively hit the street. Very quickly, I think we're forecasting that banks certainly run the risk of losing up to 29% of their traditional retail banking revenue on the back of open banking. And the question is, if you stay to the left of that previous diagram, and if you do nothing and basically just provide, have the dumb funding account, the dumb current account that holds the transaction information, we're forecasting that you can lose up to 29% of your retail banking revenue. And then as you move across the value chain, you certainly have a great chance of either breaking even or generating new revenue streams. And I was very interested actually with the video that you guys showed at the start, talking about, well, why don't we have a pie? And I think that's exactly the hypothesis of Accenture, that open banking will actually increase the size of the pie. There will be some winners and losers depending on strategies, but we feel that the overall market for banking services will increase, so therefore the size of the pie will increase. So there are revenue opportunities, but there is undoubtedly risk and undoubtedly the downside there. This one's pretty tough to see, but the other thing, we've spoken pretty much about all these so far, and again, just some examples of companies that have brought these to market. But it's all about asset aggregation. It's all about the financial services, the PFM and pre-approved lending, credit extension. So I think through the dialogue we've covered those. I'm not going to drain that slide. But I think if you want some good examples of who's doing this well, and if you want to have a look on your spare time, I've referenced Starling Bank, which isn't on the slide, but HSBC's Money Manager or Connected Money app is a great example of their ability to bring together all the disaggregated financial information previously, and how do we bring them together to provide insights to the customer base. So a great example, very user-friendly, and that's really done well. I think they had 13,000 downloads of that app within the first week. So a great example of a very strong product. And then Yolt for ING has really disrupted the UK banking market quite substantially. I think they've got up to 250,000 users in a very short period of time. So Yolt is another aggregation tool. And again, I think what we're seeing is people that come to market with a slick app that adds value to their customers, provides good insight, and is backed by strong data analytics. I think they're going to win. And I think if you don't have that, and if your app isn't considered to be as strong as that, then you run the risk that your customers simply go elsewhere. And they go elsewhere to get that. And tied in with all these is obviously payment apps as well. So I can make my payments via Yolt, whereas I would have previously gone to my own banking app to do that. So I think the banks that don't have a slick offering here run the risk that their customers go elsewhere. And I think that's the biggest challenge for the banking sector. And then Santander and Danske, we've certainly seen again some good strong product development, and we're bringing good quality aggregation apps to market. So I was just going to close there and really just again resonate with the thoughts that if you think about engaging your ecosystem, and if you think about expanding your reach, and forget the term open banking, and think about collaboration and partnerships, and then what do customers actually want? And I think if you can think about it in that way, whether you're a fintech, whether you're a customer, and suggesting to your bank in regards to services that would add value to you, but then if you're a large bank or a small bank, it's about how do you adapt, and how do you make sure that you're evolving and continually evolving and engaging your ecosystem to deliver new products to your customer base that will add value. And I think if you can successfully do that, then I think you can start to successfully move on the journey towards open banking. So that's all I was going to cover, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
So does anyone has a...
Given that the open banking advancements will increase interaction between banks and fintechs, how do you think it could benefit acquisitions from incumbents, or what have you seen abroad? Maybe given that incumbent banks will be closer to product development from fintechs, maybe it could boost some exits for investors in fintechs.
I think there's absolutely no doubt about that. And certainly, fintechs that are partnering with the banks and certainly coming up with good, strong products, particularly in niches where they can actually go and target a specific niche, very attractive to investors. I think we're certainly seeing a lot of venture capital in the UK and in Europe being invested into fintechs specifically on the back of that. So yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right in terms of the criticality of having a good quality product.
Have you seen any example abroad from these first years of open banking investments?
I can't think of any investments per se, but what we have seen certainly is a range of partnerships. It's at the moment, and I'll go back and actually do some digging on that. But what I've seen particularly is just partnerships. It's Starling coming together with Resolute, with Money Transfer, with a variety of other small fintechs, and really looking at increasing their offerings there. But let me do some digging in regards to specific investment where the large banks have taken a stake in a fintech. But I'll come back to you specifically on that.
Another question?
Hi. For already well-established fintech like Monzo in the UK, what would you say are the challenges they will face in the coming years?
I think Monzo, they've got an extremely aggressive product strategy, but they are forming very tight and very close alliances. So I think their challenge is going to be how do they continue to build, and how do they continue to grow? Because at the end of the day, they've got to disintermediate and take some of that customer transaction from the large banks. As the large banks develop their offerings and partnerships better, then Monzo doesn't look as attractive anymore. So I think the question is for Monzo, how do they continue to evolve? How do they continue to hit the, because I mean, Monzo I think has been very good at looking at what does the customer want. You know, what pain points have they got with the big banks? And let's take those pain points away. I think Monzo have been very clever in regards to that. But at a certain point, the banks will catch up.
You think they must have partnership with banks?
I think it's natural that they need to. I mean, I can't see Monzo standing alone and being able to compete with the strength of the big 9 UK banks. So I think they will continue to look for alliances and partnerships. I have no doubt about that.